As you can tell, we're swapping between case studies and thought-leading panels, and that's the definition of our next session. We have an executive summit. I want to invite Brett, Fred, Brian, okay, Phil, got it, and Tom. And Dan. And Dan's here. You look like you have a Manhattan or something going there. Always. Okay. Now, I only have a little bit of instructions for these top executives, and it is to keep the mic close, because there are people in the back that haven't been, and Brian and Phil have to share, looks like. So the format here, we're going back to encouraging interaction. I have some questions to ask the folks, but have some in your head and keep participating. But I'm going to ask, going your right to your left, each individual to introduce himself, give a little background on your company, your role in the company, and a personal statement of some sort. Start with Brett Beranek.
So Brett Beranek, I handle solution marketing for our Nina virtual assistant solutions at Nuance. We're very thrilled to have several of our customers present, Domino's being one of them, Windstream being another, so stick around for that. And Coca-Cola, of course, earlier today. So we're definitely a very strong presence in the virtual assistant space. This is part of our DNA. We've been doing it on the smartphone handsets for a while, and now with our Nina solution, we've brought that experience to the enterprise. And something personal about myself, I just came back from a wonderful trip with my 3 kids in Italy. It was a wonderful experience. We ate a lot of pizza.
Grazie.
Hi, I'm Fred Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Nyx IT. We sort of got this whole space rolling. So in 2002, 3, 4, first thing we built was Sergeant Star for Go Army. We've been in multiple spaces, financial, healthcare, travel and transportation. We pride ourselves on really taking care of the customer. We believe that customer interaction and giving them what they want is critical. And we spend a lot of time developing tools, processes, and approaches to get that done. Look forward to answering your questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Lewis. I'm the CEO of SmartAction. SmartAction is a voice-enabled, intelligent voice assistant. Think of it as a artificial intelligence-based IVR. And the founder of our company has been focused on artificial intelligence for the last about 15 years or so, and that's really the foundation of our company. Think of 2 differentiators in terms of the artificial intelligence piece of things, as well as the way we think about the problem as we break it into 2 parts. Recognition, did we hear what you said? And cognition, can we do something with what you said? And we think we excel at both of those. My background, I was a partner at Deloitte Consulting, led Deloitte's contact center advisory practice, and was frankly quite content in that role. And when the board went looking to supplement the founder, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. That was about a year ago, and so took the opportunity to join as the CEO. And I was nervous, considering I could have been fine at Deloitte for a while. And a year later, I can say I'm extremely bullish on the prospects of this company, which actually was founded in about 2002. Got about a little under 100 customers. Thank you.
I'm Brian Garr, and I'm the CEO and one of the founders of LinguaSys. We're a 4.5-year-old startup, but I've been in the linguistics business since 1995, 10 of those years at IBM. Our technology does deep understanding currently of 21 languages. So we actually do NLU analytics as well as machine translation. And we've developed something very unique called a language neutral knowledge representation, which is the first interlingua that's actually works in the industry. Really since ever. And we leverage that to great advantage, and we'll talk more about that hopefully as we continue on the panel. Something that personal, a year ago I offered to let my daughter and her husband live with us while they built a house, and next week they're settling, and thank God.
Hi, I'm Phil Gray with Interactions, and John Romano from Hyatt was kind enough to share quite a bit about interactions and some of the solutions we provided for Hyatt. I think you could tell from that we create very highly interactive, highly conversational virtual assistant applications that allow consumers to interact just as if they're talking with a person. So what ends up happening is the consumers don't have to change their behavior, don't have to adapt and even react as if they're talking to a system. They act just as if they're talking to a person. So all of the benefits of that ripple down into improved satisfaction, lower customer effort, and higher containment, automation, and self-service engagement. As far as myself, I think one thing personal is I've been in this industry a really long time, and I see lots of familiar faces here across, so it's great to see the industry maturing into where we are today. So,
Cool. So let's stay with you, Phil. I don't know if you've been following the tweet stream coming from IAC, but so one of the portrayals was that people turn to other people as they escalate in this customer care formula, and that they go to a person as the last resort, was what one of the tweets said. But the overall question is, you've kept humans in the equation even at the front end while they're still in a self-service session. What does it all mean? Are we keeping? Is human intervention destined to be grow or decrease?
okay, yeah, in that context, in terms of, our technology is unique in the fact that it blends artificial intelligence with actual real human intelligence. It does it in a way that the consumer never is aware that a person may have participated in any segment of that interaction. It's also done in a way where our customers really don't know, the clients that we serve, that there are people behind the scenes at certain points. We actually even do it in a way that the application isn't even aware. It just sends off a request to get something recognized, and it gets interpreted in the most appropriate way. The net of it is that today, to build these highly conversational, human-like conversations that, like you saw at Hyatt, does require some amount of human assistance to deliver that level of accuracy, granularity of intent capture, to be able to build that overall experience. But the fascinating part about it is that sort of these systems learn over time and are self-learning and self-evolving. So the actual amount of human involvement goes down over time. Now, does it go down to zero at some point? Possibly. Maybe in the next decade or so we'll see that. But for us, that's really not the point. The point is to deliver experiences that really deliver great business value, but also enable consumers to not have to change their behavior, to be able to react and deliver the same level of service as they would if they were talking with an agent. And those are the sort of guiding principles behind what we're doing.
We've been able to get to 93% emulating humans with the same first call resolution. So it's getting close.
It's amazing. And Brian, in your world of translation, there's so much, not translation, but in your world of rendering in multiple languages, there's so many moving parts. I've always wondered how you can tell how accurate it is, and whether if you promise high levels of accuracy, you do have to have somebody on the other end that's a native speaker that's cleaning things up and that sort of stuff.
Right. So first of all, one of the big differentiators for us is that we're semantic, not statistical. So we actually understand the meaning of the words in all of our languages. So we have a very deep semantic network that we create among these languages. So when we build them, we have obviously computational linguists who do a special task for us, as well as linguists who are native speakers. So a lot of it goes into cleaning and into QA to make sure. So one of the things you'll find, and it's an interesting dilemma, is you look at Google Translate, for example, and you look at our stuff, especially in the Asian languages, Google will always look beautiful when they translate, because they're looking for and matching large chunks of words at a time that they found through crawling the web for parallel data. Whereas we understand the words and we will get the correct fidelity, whereas Google will give you a completely different fidelity than the original statement, but it looks great. But we give you the correct fidelity, even though we may have gotten the word order a little messed up. So that's sort of the dichotomy you run up against even if it's an NLU. So, and it was interesting, part of what you said was interesting because you said that you're disruptive, and I think you're going to hear that word a lot during the next 45 minutes because we all want to be disruptive because we all want to be disruptive. But I want to be disruptive too. So I want to let Dom know that not only can someone order a pizza in 21 languages, but, and here's the really disruptive part, after we build the application, the other 20 are on the house. Because basically with our language neutral knowledge representation, we only build one application. It understands our linker. And then every language that we put onto our database talks to linker and then talks to the app. So the whole concept of adding more cost for more expertise on more languages disappears. How's that for disruptive?
That's great. Dan, if I can just follow up on something that Phil mentioned. We definitely see that there's a reduction in the amount of interactions that consumers have with human agents. And that's not only a function of business requirements to reduce costs, but also a function of consumer preference. We've conducted a number of consumer research studies that have shown that younger generations, so think about millennials, think about those 18 to 30-year-olds, and one of the things that not all of them said, but one of the recurring themes is, if I need to talk to one of your employees, then you failed. I mean, there's nothing that you can do after that point to recuperate the experience. My expectation, I think there was the gentleman from Vanguard kind of alluded to that, right? If you have a great digital experience, then you can win me over. But if I need to pick up that phone and call you, no matter what happens after picking up that phone, then I, as a Gen Y or millennial, feel that experience has already failed. So we definitely believe that there's going to be less and less human interactions. We believe that human interaction will still be part of the equation because there will be always some level of complexity that is desirable to handle through humans versus technology.
Okay. I guess the question, and I'd like to hear everybody's reaction then, and it was in one of these prepackaged things I handed out, was, well, so you've talked about how much. You're saying we're going to zero in terms of, it's failure unless it's automated. But my overall question had been like, well, how much is automated and then how soon? The guy that interviewed me for Channel 7 was saying, is this magic? Does it just happen? But the question is, where are we at, and how soon do we move towards that 90? Well, you're at 93%, but then
Not everywhere, but
right.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, my answer to that, I think it's dependent on it's not simple things. If you're going to make a dialogue, a mixed initiative dialogue, where, essentially I'm asking questions and as a system and the user's asking questions back, and I've got to connect to these deep back ends in order to get enough personalized data for context to give you the real answer. It's not a simple implementation. But once you get it done, it scales and it's massive. So I think it's about building those really good implementations and letting the industry see that that's really something you could do. That's what we aspire to do as an industry. We don't do it unless it's good. And all of a sudden, the user expectations get so big and they demand it, right? So we got to stay focused on that user and giving them that great experience through conversational dialogue. And we've said it a lot of times in different ways, but all humans know how to talk. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking with our lips or talking with our fingers like texting, we're talking. And systems can learn to respond to that in a very natural way. And that's where it's going. And I think it's there for some cases. I mean, you just saw Domino's thing, looks pretty cool. We certainly got some things with Sergeant Starr out there that are massively acceptable and working wonderful. So it's there. It's just how much effort do we want to put into finishing building it out.
Yeah. I want to hear Tom as well, because I'd heard the speeches with the earthquake in customer experience, and go ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting because the prospects of artificial intelligence has sort of been this biorhythm over the last 30 years in terms of excitement for it and then sort of some letdowns. And it's interesting to think about the investments that have gone in the last, since the beginning of the year that, that we know about, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.5+ billion in artificial intelligence investments through, internal investments as well as acquisitions and so forth. So there's a lot of focus on that piece of it. But from a human interaction perspective, I think it'll be interesting to see where the curve is in terms of the consumer's readiness for it. One of the things that I think that you'll find in a lot of the interactions through voice is that the consumer has been programmed to assume that the IVR stinks. And that everybody has had a terrific experience and 9 to 10, 9 times out of 10, it's a horrible experience. And so they just assume that it's going to be horrible and they need to talk to a live agent. So even if you have the best voice interaction platform on the planet, there's a decent chance that your consumer is not going to give you a fair shake. So that's one thing. That's from the consumer side. From the other side of the coin, think about it from the call center manager's perspective. The question I like to ask is, do you think that your technology and the way in which you run your call center today, or said another way, is the way that you run your call center in 2050 is going to be the same as the way you do it today? And the answer invariably is no, I think it'll be different. Well, how will it be different? Well, there'll be more introduction of essentially robots and artificial intelligence and so forth. And so then the conversation naturally should go to, okay, so where's the tipping point? Is it really 2050 or is it 2015? And so where that is, both from an operations perspective, with a lot of people stuck in the way that they sort of think about call center operations generically, lack of omni-channel, so forth, versus the way in which the consumer is ready to adopt the technology. All of this is coming to a head, and I think when you follow the money, as they said, you're going to see some interesting things develop over the next few years.
And is the investment in artificial intelligence the, the core there?
I think it's a very interesting component of it because there has been, like I said, so much prospects for it in the past, and I think now the computing power and the number of people working on the problem simultaneously and the number of people trying to solve the problem from multiple different angles. And there may be an interesting issue relative to standards adoption and those kind of things. That'll be the next issue, and who has the better mousetrap and who opens their and exposes their capabilities to be sold and licensed versus proprietary. So AI is clearly a piece. The other piece is clearly from a recognition perspective. One of the challenges that you have is, although HD voice is a real thing, as soon as you have communication that isn't on a single platform, so in other words, you're calling from your Verizon phone to another Verizon phone, that may be an HD call with protocols that can hear very well. But as soon as you're calling a landline or another vendor or what have you, all those protocols go out the window. And that's 15 years, 20 years before that problem gets fixed. So if you want to talk to a phone and have the phone interface with you, great. But if you want to talk to a telephony platform, and that's how most people are going to continue to communicate for a long time, that's clearly going to be a challenge from an infrastructure perspective for a long time. So both AI and voice recognition are clearly part of the problem.
Boy, that's our first, the plumbing is the issue, kind of. But so plumbing, standards, AI, and don't condemn us to 15 years. I think we can knock the transcoding thing, but
if it weren't for the telcos, I'd agree.
Ooh, take that. We need more of them here to learn the advantage of.
Well, no one singled out, because that's the problem. Is it's
Well, we only
collaboration.
mentioned Verizon, but yes, no, I hear you. Questions in mind from the audience? Well, then I'm going to return.
There's one in the back.
Wait, you do see one?
You're blinded by that light.
Okay. Derek's getting the mic.
We do have a question here.
We can see you. Here comes the mic.
So how do you resolve the zero-out problem? I mean, how could you implement something this day and age where you have enough information and keep enough interest on the caller to engage the virtual assistant to get what they want? I mean, you bring up a good point. It's ultimately, it's how you implement it. But anytime I hear people talk about it, I never hear a solution. Maybe there is not one. Maybe there's no, silver bullet that handles the zero-out problem for a customer. They get too impatient. They want to talk to a live person.
Yeah. We'll target Phil first.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I could turn back to John Romano's point at Hyatt. I think part of it, and their whole goal was never to remove people from the equation. And I think in terms of customer care, that should never be the goal, that you have a complete 100% automation. There are people there who are choosing to engage with associates for a particular reason. The key to that is to maximize those experiences so that it's really value-added time that's being spent. And the second would be that consumers aren't sort of getting trapped and then feeling that they have to escape out to get to a person, so that zero-out effect, that can go away. So if you actually have a very intuitive system, I mean, some of our better sort of experiences last less than 5 seconds because we capture an intent right away and know that customer has to go to a very particular representative quickly. And we make that decision within seconds, and that customer's happy, and we've delivered lots of value. Now, other times, when we capture intent, we can help the customer right there, like you heard with the customer who wanted to find out what the check-in time is. Now, if you notice that call, that's the quickest way he could have gotten that information. I mean, if you think about going to the web and trying to find that, or any other way, the fastest way is to say, hey, what's the check-in time for the Hyatt Regency O'Hare? And it comes back. And that's where we're getting to. We're getting to a point where it's not about IVR or automation. It's about really making things easy for customers to not force them to change their behavior, to not make them think all of a sudden now I'm interacting with a system. What do I have to say? How do I have to act? Just to let them be their normal and natural selves and speak in their own words and react intuitively. So that's what we've been able to do, and I think that's why the engagement levels are high, and the zero outs are virtually zero. Virtually the actual zero out, like you're saying, really don't exist in these systems.
Yeah, Phil, I would echo your points and just add one minor point, which is at the front end, if you're able to engage and give them sort of the comfort that they are engaging with something that is going to have the capabilities Phil talked about and some of the other stuff that the entire panel's been talking about, early on, reflective kind of reaction is going to be key.
So if you can get them to talk to a virtual assistant first instead of just on the phone, then you have the visual talk, tap, and type, the way to interact back if speech rec didn't work right. So I think ultimately the consumer is going to expect that multimodal, multi-channel, omni experience in any channel, right? And that's very difficult to do on a normal landline. But you know, the usage of smartphones is going through the roof. And as soon as I know you're on a smartphone, then I can enable other kinds of conversations. And yeah, I got to change channels, but it'll work. And I think the user is going to expect that, and they're going to have that rich experience where even though speech isn't working, that you can still see what's going on, you can still interact and get to the ultimate outcome. So I think it's smart, starting on the smart device, and that's what people want anyway.
Yeah, I think we're living in very exciting times when consumer expectations are changing quite a bit. And you had mentioned, right, that expectation that the IVR experience may not be great, and so customers zeroing out. Well, what we've noticed is that as consumer expectations are evolving, they basically have an expectation that experience that they have, for example, with the Domino's app. Right, so they have that interactive, conversational, speech-enabled experience in the smartphone, that then they can have a similar type of experience on the web or a similar type of experience within the IVR. So, just building on the cross-channel, omni-channel point, I think that the consumer reference points and their expectations for experience are changing very rapidly, and so we'll see that the general population, as they're exposed to more of these virtual assistants within mobile apps and web, will basically have an expectation that same experience will exist within the phone channel, and then it's just up to the enterprises to make sure that they are delivering that type of experience.
You know, there's an old joke in my business that someone who speaks 3 or more languages is called a polyglot, and someone who speaks 2 languages is bilingual, and someone who speaks 1 language is an American. The multimodality and multi-channel means more than just being able to speak English. There are 86 million Americans who are buyers in this country who don't speak English at home. So, and that's not even talking about, do you want to be in Europe? Do you want to play in Asia? Do you want to play in South America? So it's important that the conversation include the conversation about I want my customer in Russia to have the same experience as my customer in the US. I want my Spanish customer or my Portuguese customer in South Beach, which is where I'm from, to have the same experience as the American-speaking person in South Beach. So it goes beyond, it's almost catching up, you know, people starting to say, yeah, Brian, that makes sense. I'm starting to get that vibe. But it's been long overshadowed in this industry in particular that people speak in more than one language in this country.
So I think the short answer to your question is that success will breed success, and the more often that a system, be it through the web, through an IVR, or in whatever language you might, is able to satisfy the requirements of the individual and speed up their process to accomplish their tasks, that's what we want to keep repeating. And we're going to see more of that once the phone companies let us do it. Up here? The mic is coming. Derek can leap tall tables in a single bound.
Thank you. Along those lines of success breeds success, but you also talked about the plumbing. You talked about when the major players, most of them, a lot of them presented here, are going to make these licenses available for other, developers to build these. But I still see that the focus here and everything we're talking about is for those large enterprise applications. And maybe I'm ahead of the curve, but when do you see this happening for the smaller enterprises, the SMBs? These are the guys that are really going to, open it up completely. Until these guys get into it, it's still, a very, very narrow, very large enterprise, but very,
So I'd like to answer that one because actually that's where we're headed.
You want to answer it first, and then...
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. No, just me. Guys? The short answer is we're doing that now. So basically, if you go by our table, there's a flyer there about an NLP portal we just opened, which is free to start using our APIs so you can handle multiple languages. But the short answer is we believe we're going to change the price structure of NLU because of the fact that because of our linker, we can in fact do an application once and it handles all 21 languages and however many more we add in the next 6 months, 9 months, a year. So we are looking at NLU for SMBs and solo practitioners.
My answer briefly would be that there's two pieces to it. One is that the story I told as a consultant was that in the mid-90s, went to a conference and CTI was all the rage, and the notion that every call center within a couple of years would have screen pops and CTI and so forth. And as a consultant, when I left consulting, I would say 80% of the call centers I went into still didn't have screen pops and CTI. And so when you think about the introduction of technology, whether it's what we're talking about today or anything inside what I refer to as the snowflake of technology that exists in the call center world, you're going to find different adoption curves, different priorities, et cetera. And so it's not only a what's available from a capabilities perspective, but also what are your corporate priorities and where are you going to invest in. And so from a speech recognition or an artificial intelligence perspective, I think the answer is the same, however, which is that it is, I would say today, extremely scalable. From a SmartAction's perspective, we work in call centers that are less than 50 agents and can turn around an extraordinary ROI on just that small number of, and that's just a benchmark. We can talk more, but you get the point.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, I think that, and I'm glad that you brought up CTI because the contact center world does have a number of technologies that have their set of complexities to it and can be challenging even for the very large enterprise to deploy, regardless, smaller organizations. I find that virtual assistants are a very accessible technology. We, at least at Nuance, have had a number of customers that in their overall size are relatively small organizations that have very successfully deployed virtual assistants. One that I can talk about publicly is Kaspersky Software. Some of you may be familiar with their antivirus solutions that they sell online. In the grand scheme of things, right, they're not a Fortune 100 company, they're not a Fortune 500 company either. They're a smaller organization, and yet with a very minimal investment financially and a very minimal investment from a human resources perspective, they were able to deploy a virtual assistant on their website and deliver tremendous value. They've reported a 25% increase in the average order value, a 7% increase in e-commerce conversion rate, and they realize a return on investment within 3 months of launching it. Now, having said that, then at the same time, I think about an organization such as Domino's Pizza that has an incredible amount of complexity. So I don't want to make a statement that any SMB right would have the same experience as Kaspersky did. But if the overall business rules are relatively straightforward and simple, then the virtual assistant is definitely a technology that can very easily and quickly and cheaply be deployed.
It sort of matters what the consumer thinks about. So if I'm a consumer talking to a little bank or Chase, my questions are about the same. So there's a lot of investment around the natural language understanding layer. Once you get that built, pizza would be another example, right? Once you get the dialogue around pizza figured out, that could scale to a little mom and pop pizza store. So it's really about getting that natural language understanding, getting the dialogue figured out and the goals of the consumer, and then it's a matter of how do I hook that to the back end. And that can be really expensive, right? But once you get that done, it can scale.
Sure, take the mic.
So you address the issue from a technology perspective and from the reality of what is possible. But really, the problem I see is the business model that the nuances of the world are using. Yes, you do have a few case studies of smaller companies, but often when a small company comes, the technology is available for the large guys, but you tell them to go somewhere else because your business model isn't suited to help these smaller companies.
Well, since that was a very targeted question,
Welcome to that.
I'll respond to that first.
And then I want to word in, but go ahead.
So, and again, it's in the same line as what I was talking about from a technology perspective. So just as the technologies had a lot more complexity in the contact center world and less complexity in the web and mobile world, we also realized that the business models had to evolve. And so one of the things that, if you work closely with us, you'll realize is that we've recycled our business models and adapted them to the virtual assistant space and are delivering our technologies completely differently in that space than we have traditionally been delivering them in the contact center space. So I think that probably most of the organizations sitting at this table, right, have realized that there's a quite of a different type of business approach and technology approach to delivering technology in the contact center versus the web space or the mobile app space.
Really good point. And if you synthesize what Brian was saying and your question, that there's some models, we talked about APIs, there were questions about tooling, although we haven't talked about tooling, but I think the next generation we're going to see, Apple being the exception here if we're going to target a company, is some way opening up a way to build a smartphone app that does many of these things, and it'll happen. It's just it's on a different. It's in a parallel universe. Let's be honest, but it is happening. I didn't mean to intervene too much, but I don't know if you guys share, agree, or want to comment.
If you deliver the right user experience, they will come.
Exactly, and it's built around user. I mean, if you do indeed take a customer-centric view, which is what this is trying to encourage, then you start sort of building these things on the smart mobile devices and sort of taking the APIs you can. And when NFIB or somebody does a position paper on it, then we start to see some interesting things.
Yeah, so one of the interesting offshoots of this is the fact that going from statistical to semantical worlds means that you don't need the skill sets, so that, for example, any decent C# programmer can take our APIs and develop an entire application. They don't need to necessarily know the algorithms behind it. We lay out the APIs, and you can build a system just because you know how to write programming, just logic.
I think there are a lot of organizations that are interested in the technology, but we're still kind of early in the in the maturity cycle for intelligent assistants. So, do you guys have any kind of approach or methodology that you use when companies are interested, but they're not really sure what kind of use cases would be the most applicable for this kind of technology to try to kind of help them sell it or maybe do a proof of concept or something?
Yeah, I can definitely share and let my colleagues here respond. One of the key things that we did notice is, especially on the mobile virtual assistants, that there was a lot of interest within the enterprise space, especially once the smartphone vendors came up with virtual assistants that were embedded in the phone. A lot of enterprises woke up and said, hey, we want to have this experience within our mobile app or web or whatnot as well, but not necessarily a good comprehension of where that experience could deliver tangible business value. And so, there isn't a single answer to that question that will cover most organizations. But one of the things that we have done is look at, well, what drives cost to your organization, right? So what drives cost to the order process? What drives cost in the customer care process? Are there specific use cases that lead consumers to pick up the phone and call you, which is the costly channel, right, and speak to a human agent? In the e-commerce space, right, are there use cases or situations where consumers will abandon the shopping cart process, right? And then we narrow down on those specific use cases so that the virtual assistant is delivering very tangible value. And I think, right, if we think back about the Coca-Cola scenario or the case study that was presented by Michael Barros earlier, right, I think Mike shared with the team, with the group here, that they had an issue with Coca-Cola points, and they also had an issue with consumers just reacting to advertisement, right? So once you identify what's costing you money, then you can develop a virtual assistant that addresses those specific scenarios. And that's where we see the absolutely, phenomenal business results, such as, the Coke case, where they've had double-digit reductions in calls to their contact center.
Okay.
I would recommend, if you have human-to-human chat, trying it in that place very specifically, because you've got the chats between two humans. It's easy to take the AI and analyze it, figure out what you can do, and the ROI is sort of proof positive. You either contain that chat without escalating to the human, or you don't. So the ROI is very easy to measure. The only thing you really have to do is check for escalations after the call. And then you contained it. But that's a real simple place for someone that wants to start trying to understand, how robust are these things? Can they really do all the stuff that my humans are doing? So that's what I would recommend. A lot of times when you can do too many things, it's difficult to make that decision.
Exactly. Tom?
My point of view on it would be in terms of getting started. SmartAction's clear focus is on the voice channel. And, imagine having the conversation with prospects around selling what is essentially IVR in a mature environment. There's enough, I've seen that movie before, kind of experiences out there in terms of IVR implementations, that it becomes a very difficult conversation. So you need to present it in a way that minimizes risk and demonstrates differentiation from what the consumer and the client is used to before. I think it's also important to understand that the adoption of new technology over the years, the window at which the introduction through the adoption takes place has dramatically decreased over time. Introduction of the telephone took 40 years to adopt, whereas the introduction of other technologies in the last 3 or 4 years takes years or months to adopt. So that's a big piece of it as well. I do think that a lot of experience, the movie that people have seen as huge upfront investments locked into something that in some cases, for customer experience or other purposes, it's cheaper or better to just turn it off, is a wasted investment. And certainly the business model that we're going after and the conversations that we're having is we understand that risk, and we want to share in that success and that risk with you. So I would say challenge your vendors to make sure that the risk is in the appropriate place.
Yeah, there's an even easier way to start your search, and that is to go by our table and pick up the URL for our free NLP portal, and your people can get started tomorrow.
Okay, there you go. And on that cheery note, I think we got an interesting cross-section here, and starting to expose the fact that virtual assistant business is still emerging, and we're defining it here and now, and we'll have some more mature answers. Tom?
I just wanted to thank you, Dan. I mean, what was interesting at lunch is that I realized that we've all been to tons of these kind of conferences before. What was interesting about this collection of people is that the clients have different and competing needs, and the vendors also have different and competing needs, which allows for very robust conversation. So I want to thank you for putting this together. I think it's very
You're
interesting.
definitely welcome, and thank you. Thank everybody. Very good.